So I've been playing a lot of High Fleet, which for me turned into a refueling and part delivery simulator. There was this one moment where I was trying to refuel my flagship as fast as possible to get back on the road, and I thought, this is just like Starstruck Vagabond, but if you're trying really hard. For those of you who don't know and don't care, Starstruck Vagabond is an upcoming casual space silly trucking sim game to be released sometime this year. The alpha came out years ago though, and I played way too much of it, got a fully upgraded ship, all that nonsense. I haven't touched it in forever, but screw it. Let's push my rusty skills to the limit. Let's spend more time appreciating the fine details of this game's mechanics than Yahtzee ever put into actually making them. We return to the journey of the Starstruck Vagabond. Retirement should have been paradise. A luxurious ship to reside in, a successful career to reflect upon, and a galaxy of paradise to travel to. Instead, we find our hero restless and penniless, destroyed by a crippling banana addiction. With no choice but to return to the stars, will the Starstruck Vagabond be able to acquire the 1 million credits needed to pay off the Banafia in only an hour? No, that's ridiculous. But I want to use that last digit of the money bar, so what about 1 million in 2 hours? Okay, it takes 2 fuel to fly to a new sector, 1 for each engine. If I use prime warp fuel at 300 credits each, that's 600 credits per sector. If I say you have to move about 3 sectors total during a delivery, that means I'm paying about 1,800 credits for a delivery. So I need my reward per mission minus that times number of missions to equal 1 million, but I don't remember how much the reward is for a typical delivery. Okay, I think I remember that late game deliveries are more than like $4,000, which would give me 450 deliveries. Actually, looks like the rewards are more like 8,000, which gives me 161 deliveries. If we take like a conservative estimate of 200 trips in 120 minutes, that's a mission every 36 seconds. Okay. If I swap out with the normal fuel, which only costs 200 credits, that means I can get my time up to 45 seconds per trip, but I still need to spend a little bit of time cleaning the gunk out of my fuel tank for the impure fuel. But that doesn't really matter, because deliveries still take way more time than this. You know what, it's going to take a lot of hours to actually get 1 million, so maybe let's not do that. But you know what might be really role-playing-y? Seeing how long I can go on just the 67 prime fuel I have in my tank, and whatever I can pick up along the way, without stopping to refuel where the enemy can catch me. Running a bunch more calculations, it looks like 11-ish trips, which maybe can get me to 100k? We return to the journey of the Starstruck Vagabond. Something down his luck, something running away from the Banafia this time. Something has to make 100,000 something, but don't get caught along the way. Okay, rules for nerds. I'm using demo version 1.8. Maintenance hints are off because I'm an adult. And I'm going to say like a minute is the maximum amount of time I'm allowed to spend at a dock. The less, the better. I don't have a timer. It's casual, let's have fun. After a bit of playing, it turns out that even that minute on the ground was way faster than I was really going to be able to pull off. The obvious time killer was the actual task of moving the boxes onto the ship and getting them onto the stamping machines. Oh yeah, there's automation game mechanics for some reason. I had long mastered the art of lining up the stampers next to the loading platform, so I can just save 4 pickups and 4 drops. But during this run I realized that by picking up a 5th box, I can let that one stamp while the others get moved into long-term storage. I blame the leveling system for teaching me wrong. In the early game, you have a lot more crates than stamina to pick them up, so even those little bit of movements to get stuff underneath the stampers is really not worth it. It's going to slow you down while you have to sit and go find something to eat. But in the late game, you start to have a lot more stamina than crates, so suddenly, time becomes a bigger factor. There was one far more subtle mistake I was making. Flying the ship. Being in the pilot's seat gives you a flying minigame, which among other things lets your ship go a little bit faster. It also lets you dodge asteroids, which I think helps compared to autopilot, which is why I was trying to not get my ship hurt by dodging impacts. I found that nothing keeps you stuck at dock like your warp drive not working, so the hope was dodge the asteroids, keep the warp drive functioning, and then bust out of there the moment I've got the crates in. What I failed to realize was the biggest threat to your warp drive is running the warp drive. Whenever you warp into a new system, there's a decent chance you just rendered your own engines inoperable there. If you set your route to the destination planet, put on autopilot, and run back into the engine room, you've got about just enough time to get the warp drive operational again by the time you dock. The autopilot is smart enough to know when to stop at a planet, thank God. And actually, if you're in the chair when you stop, that's another 20 seconds that you need to walk back from your captain's chair down to the loading platform that you don't have. And so I learned. I adapted. I persisted. Somehow, I avoided contact with any enemy strike groups. One box mysteriously went missing during one delivery, but our ingenious engineers were able to find ways to make do with what supplies we had. Sometimes war calls for desperate measures. Okay, I edited the mission in the save file. Never made a rule that said I couldn't. After a few hours of gameplay, I had reached 80% of my goal. But then disaster struck. An asteroid struck a critical blow to my impulse drive, unrepairable from inside or outside the ship. In an instant, I was stranded. Struck down from the stars. Star struck down. A vagabond doomed to drift for all time. I'd answered so many distress calls over the years, but in my time of need, it was just me and the void. No, it's not over. So a week after soft locking, I realized something. Whenever you warp to a new system, you appear at a random spot in that system. Confusingly for new players, sometimes that spot is directly on a planet. I might not have my impulse drive, but I've still got full warp capability, and enough fuel for a couple dozen jumps. And I have the Emperor on my side, or something. Not far from me was the Defi system, with no fewer than 3 planets with shipyards. If I could warp onto any one of them, I might be able to buy an upgrade, any upgrade, that could reset my damage. Even if I landed on some other civilized planet, I would at least survive. I didn't know if dirty warp components lowered fuel efficiency at all, but I wasn't taking any chances. I polished those warp coils like I polished my... Sadly, there wasn't a nearby system that also had multiple shipyards, so I could just warp between the two and double my chances. But there were at least a couple systems with one shipyard and a few civilized planets, so I was going to settle for that. And so, I warped. You don't realize how much you miss the thrum of the impulse engines until they're rendered silent. It really underscored the increasing desperation of my situation. I'd long run out of food at this point, except for the eternal ship's biscuits. I didn't mind. Every banana would have meant less space for fuel, and one less chance to survive. Still, after a few minutes of jumping, the warp fuel I had was running low. Back and forth and back and forth. So close, but far too far. Eventually I was down to my last 2 units of prime warp fuel. So what'd I do? What else could I do? I loaded them in the engines, set one more course for the Defi system, and held my breath. And nothing.
This is the end. The bitter, bitter end.
But the sacrifice was not all in vain. After having to mess with the save files to keep the run going, I started dinking around more and soon found a whole treasure trove of save hacking goodies. It is now my pleasure to present the world's first mod for Starstruck Vagabond, the alpha version, and not even the latest alpha version 0.1.8. And it has nothing to do with the story either. But still, I think it's an interesting skill challenge. And I like that I was able to make it at all. Maybe use my noodle a little. And that's what I love about unfinished games. The devs haven't game designed all the fun out of them yet. For those of you that have been following since my early videos, it's you, Untrusted Life. Hi. That's why I love games like DR4X. I got to discover the mushroom trains all by myself. I wasn't told to discover them. I enjoy my video game experiences, but I love my video game toys. And when you ask people about their favorite memories of a toy, half the time it's breaking the crap out of it.